Clay, thanks for making it to Veterans Daily with Jay and Clay. We are glad you made it. And before we get started, Clay, I'm just going to point out that your shirts are ridiculous. And if anybody wants a ridiculous shirt, then now you know where to get them, from Clay. So we did have some folks on Veterans Info Tap ask about your tinnitus shirt, and I said I'm pretty sure he's selling them. Don't know exactly where or how or do all that, but definitely check him out on his channel, the Civ Div. I'm sure that there's somewhere, somehow in there that they can find out how to buy the ridiculous shirts. And highly suggest, I mean, if you wore that to your CNP exam, just saying, I mean, you never know. It could help, right?
Yes, the guaranteed measure for certain connection.
Yeah, I mean, it's the little things, right? So you're coming prepared is what it is. So yeah, with that, hey, we have some really great topics to cover, some information that just went down in the House Veterans Affairs Committee, notifying the VA, notifying them of all the great things that they've been doing. And so not to take your thunder away, because I know how much you love to really point out the great things that the VA has done for veterans. I'm going to leave that to you. But before we jump into it, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, share with a friend, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. And look, if you just watch this channel every once in a while because you're watching our other channels and all that, please subscribe if you're not. We really want to grow this channel because the more, it's kind of like being a veteran service organization. The more people that we have as subscribers, the louder our voice is, as we're, well, mostly Clay is. He's stomping around about different things with the VA. The awareness seems to be bigger, right? Because of the subscriber count. So thank you for doing that. With that, Clay, over to you to enlighten us on some of the things that went down very recently.
Oh, yeah. So first off, thank you for that non-paid promotion, Jason. Just so everyone knows, that was not planned. I definitely appreciate that, Jason, for the shout out, especially over on Veterans Info Tap. But with the HVAC, which is in the House Veteran Affairs Committee, they speak on things about monthly, and this was specifically about CMP exams. And so that really led to the topic of everything that's wrong with the VA disability claims process, because you could imagine the VA really said, hey, everything is going great. In fact, one representative said, he asked a question because the way the VA was answering questions was basically, it's perfect. The representative was like, well, why are we having this hearing then? And that pretty much popped the balloon. It was great to see live. What a stellar answer or question. But I broke this down into 4 topics, Jason, that I really think the veteran community should absolutely pay attention to and what they can do about them, and we'll have that conversation. But the first one is VHA not completing DBQs, which is a huge contentious piece of the whole process, although the VA secretary went on a press conference and said that VHA providers are supposed to complete DBQs, but we all know that they're not. And then we're going to just talk about the variability of CMP examiners. Sometimes you'll have a 100-mile CMP exam. I had someone email me after that committee a 168-mile CMP exam, meaning they had to drive 168 miles, which is just insane, right? And then we'll talk about VSR training and outcomes of that process, of the VA claims process. And then lastly, Jason, transparency on the VBA process, which in my opinion is the linchpin to all of these problems. The reason why the VA is able to do, or the VBA, is able to do what they do is because of the lack of transparency. Now, that's the outline for today. I want to go back to VHA not completing DBQs. Jason, open-ended. I definitely have my thoughts on this, but open-ended question. What are your thoughts on VHA providers, which are, by the way, if I had to take a wild guess, 90%, if not more of them, refuse when requested to complete DBQs, which, by the way, is a VA form. So go ahead. Take that away.
I haven't talked about this for a while, and I'm as irritated now as I've ever been just thinking about it. It really bothers me that they don't. So one, we have, first of all, like you said, the VA is supposed to complete those.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, because every single VISN within the VHA, right, their leadership, they all run their ships kind of however they want, in a way that it's pretty hands off, as you could imagine. And so, for whatever reason, nobody, I mean, there could be the every once in a while, as you alluded to, there could be that 5% or whatever that have done them. But that's a people thing, right? That's just some provider deciding to do it because it's the damn right thing to do. But for the most part, this isn't happening. Now, it's frustrating because of a few different factors. One, we have veterans who may only have VHA as their health care. Meanwhile, they're trying to file another claim for an increase or for a secondary or whatever. And a DBQ would make life a lot easier within the VA's VBA claims benefits process, but it's not getting done. And in some cases, veterans feel it's necessary to get a DBQ. One, because they hear about how important DBQs are, and so they feel as though they need to get it. In some cases, they might not need to, but let's just, for the sake of argument, they need it. So then they have to go pay out of pocket for this DBQ from some other doctor, or go to some agency organization that does this. Then we fall into this situation of, oh, the OIG's pissed off that there's these DBQs that are coming from these different places. Well, if the damn VHA would have done them, we wouldn't be in this position to go get them ourselves with our public facing ones. So it should absolutely be mandatory that the VHA complete DBQs. Quite frankly, Clay, for this is what I would propose. You want to fix the DBQ issue? No more public facing. Okay, fine. No more public facing. All DBQs are mandated to be completed by VHA. Oh, by the way, even if you're not connected to the VHA, it's your first claim, you never even filed a claim with the VA, none of that. If you're filing a claim and your condition is on there, you can go get a DBQ from a VHA provider, period. They should just automatically have to do that. You could bring your evidence from somewhere else and get a DBQ done, whatever, and have that conversation. I think that it's a disservice to veterans that they don't do it. I think it puts veterans in a financial hardship. Sure, some people can afford to go do it. Some people have other insurance, but that's not who I'm worried about. I'm worried about the veteran who can't afford it, but is made to go do it. Because look, if you can't afford to do it, you can't afford not to do it, because the gold at the end of the road, right? So you're struggling trying to get there, and it's putting people in a bad position, I believe. Also, I think that when it comes to DBQs being completed at the VHA, Clay, I think that I think it gives. I'm going to wrap it up with this. I think that the VHA, the Veterans Health Administration, needs to operate in a more customer service mindset, not from the mindset of we have a monopoly on these customers, we can do what we want. No, wrong answer. You need to bend over backwards to serve us above and beyond and give us this beyond excellent service to where we want to come back. And I think that the DBQ piece plays two roles in that. One, it's the right thing to do, and it will help accomplish that stellar level of service. But also, it will introduce veterans to the VHA. They're worried about us going to community care. Okay, well, how about introduce us to VHA? Wrap your arms around us, show us you care. And then when we finish up our claim, we're going to be coming back there instead of going, that place sucks. I want to go over here to community care where I feel like I'm actually getting taken care of. Back to you, Clay.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. There are so many factors. And I also love how you brought up the fraudulent DBQs, because what it seems like the VHA wants to, or the VA, wants to eat their cake and then have it too, right? So they want both scenarios where it's like, hey, private DBQs are bad. But we won't do them, right? It's like, okay, well, what's going on? Not to mention, at the HVAC, at the hearing, the VA described the cost of DBQs. Every single DBQ completed by a contracted CMP examiner costs money. it was about $350 per DBQ on average. I'm going to guess that was an average figure the VA threw out, which $350 doesn't seem like much until you have 2 million claims in a year. All of a sudden, that's a lot. And keep in mind, these are approved and denied claims. So the 1 million PACT Act claims, that's just approved. That has nothing to do with all the denials. And so think of all those denials just for PACT Act that each required a DBQ. If you have a mental health exam, a sinusitis exam, and a hypertension exam, that's 3 DBQs right there. You're in, I'm trying to do quick math. What is that? Almost $1,000, right? Whatever. 1,050, right? And so not only would it save the VA money, which are taxpayer dollars, by the way, but I like how you described, my daughter's FaceTiming me right now. Stop that. I like how you described the fraudulent DBQ aspect to it, because DBQs are extremely expensive. And it also sucks that the best person, the number one provider to complete the DBQ is none else than your primary care. Your doctor will beat a one-time visit to a psychiatrist. They will beat a 3-time visit to some other physician in some other discipline, whatever. And if the VA is going to have that standard, that's the correct thing to do, by the way. Your primary care should be the standard. If the VA is going to make it that standard, but then they say, hey, primary care, can you complete this DBQ? No, I can't. It's like, okay, well, what are we left to do? And now it forces veterans to go get an independent medical opinion. And just to be clear, the IMO and the private DBQ, there's nothing wrong with that. You will really see those shine in appeals, specifically supplemental claims and the Board of Appeals. The fraudulent DBQs really lean towards alteration of, and you can check that video out. I'm going to go ahead and leave it below in the pinned comments, because that's a whole worm of cans right there. Whole can of worms. You get what I'm saying, right?
No.
But yeah, I just can't
explain that.
What what really bothers me on the DBQs and VHA is we have the VHA Directive 1134, which I know people are going to comment saying, hey, that's a directive, they're supposed to do it. Got it. It means absolutely dog water if the VHA is not doing it. So you can say VHA Directive 1134 all you want. It doesn't mean anything. You might as well be speaking Cantonese to your provider, because it doesn't matter. But not only that, the VA secretary, so Mr. McDonough, okay, Secretary McDonough was asked a very good question by a veteran. And the question, paraphrase, was, hey, if the VHA is my only healthcare provider and that provider is not completing DBQs, what am I to do? Which is a great, I watched this live. When I saw that question answered, I paused the video and I was doing a stream. I was like, I am so interested to see how the secretary is going to answer this. And what did he say? He said, paraphrase again, he was like, it grinds my gears every time I hear that, they're supposed to do it. That's it. And I was like, dude, you're the secretary. What do you mean?
And since the implementation of the PACT Act, we've served over.
More veterans are getting more benefits than ever before, right? Which is all good. But once he gave that answer, it was a clear indicator to me. And I don't want to make this into a bashing VA episode, which is totally going to turn into. But it's like, dude, you're the secretary. That was a valid question that someone just asked you. And it was a very scapegoat type answer. And that was about 3 months ago, maybe 2-3 months ago. And where are we at right now? Absolutely nothing.
We're not going to see anything. We're not going to see anything, Clay. And the reason why is because he's out the door. He's already got 1 foot out the door. He's already made it public that he's not going to stay beyond the current administration. So no matter who wins, he's out. And so he's just riding out his time. He's not going to try to fix anything. He is just going to be status quo. And I don't even see him doing much with regard to the $3 billion mandated reporting type stuff. And working cooperatively with the OIG regarding their budget shortfall. I think it's just going to be crickets and delays and, oh, I'm out. Save it for the next guy or gal.
Oh yeah, I wonder if there's any behind the scenes. You would generally have some type of turnover, and so you have all these under execs like SESs. There are so many SESs, and SESs are your above GS15 level for anyone who does not know. And then each VA facility, and I like how you brought up too. Their VA facilities are very autonomous, kind of like regional offices, right? They just kind of do what they want. They interpret VA policy. They don't follow VA policy, which sounds crazy. But that's why VHA Directive 1134 means nothing. Because if that facility says, hey, we don't do DBQs, that's it, right? Because at that point, you might work for the VA, you might be a physician, but you're still a federal employee, and federal employees do what they're told because that's how we get paid, right? I know this because I'm a federal employee myself, not for the VA, for another agency. But yeah, man, the whole DBQ situation is an ingredient for a large disaster of what we have now, where veterans feel the need. I must go to this company to consult with my claim and get a private Nexus Letter, get a private DBQ, because VA is just not doing what they're supposed to do. And as much as I disagree with companies, that's a valid argument. Like, veterans do feel that,
Yeah.
and you know, I trash talk companies all the time. It's one of my favorite things to do. Sunday evening, no better life than trashing these companies. But that doesn't invalidate the argument of why they exist in the first place. And I
Right.
think the
And,
VA really needs to take a look at that.
and we talked about that before, Clay,
Hmm.
about how this is the direct result of underfunding the veteran service officers and other people that can
Yeah.
help with free claims assistance, and the inability of, or not even inability, the non-compliance of the VHA providing DBQs. What we have today is because of those two things. Those companies emerged, right? All the DBQ companies out there, veterans who are spending their last nickels going to places trying to get a DBQ. Because,
Hmm.
and look, if there wasn't so much weight and focus put on, hey, a DBQ really helps outline everything, so you could streamline things. Maybe it would be a little bit different. Let's talk about this for a second, Clay.
Yeah.
If somebody was unable, right, to get a DBQ from the VHA, and they have two nickels, man. They're not. You don't want them. That they can't go spend X anywhere. What is the suggestion for them, right? Because we need to provide some hope here, right? So what is the fine? You can't get a DBQ. Take a knee, adjust fire. Here's your next course of action. This is what you need to do. I want to hear it from you. What you think
Yeah.
somebody should.
So the assumption is they don't have the funds available to purchase a DBQ themselves for that claim, right? And
Yep.
there's really two tracks, and I'm gonna make a recommendation that I'm gonna punch myself in the face for later on.
Let's do it on
But
camera now.
seriously, yeah, I know, and I will. Don't worry. First off, let's talk denials, right? I think if you're denied and you truly have no funds to fight that yourself, and you're denied on the basis of a nexus, I'm not gonna say you're gonna need, because that would be incorrect, but it would be highly advised for you to get a DBQ and a private nexus to fight that, because that's the new and relevant evidence that you need. In that instance, and you have no money, I think the accredited attorney is going to be the way to go. Lots of attorneys have, various partnerships, not like we do here on YouTube, where you'll see like affiliated links or sponsored videos. That attorney has partnerships with his local community, their local community, on various providers, right? And then that's coming out of that back pay. The attorneys handle all that. Their attorneys aren't doing affiliated links because they are attorneys, right? And there's some legalities with that. But let's say it's not a denial, it's an initial claim. Um, should you submit a DBQ with your initial claim? I think so, yes, if it's free. If it's not, to be honest with you, I would submit your evidence-based claim. So look at evidence from service, right? Your time in service, what the VA will call the in-service event. Any evidence that indicates that condition stemmed, those symptoms happened, or the diagnosis happened in service, get that evidence, go to the VA, go to your private insurance, whatever you have, get a current diagnosis, current symptoms, and submit the claim as is. I think, Jason, what I really want to harp on here, and that's such a good question, is I fully believe veterans complicate the process way more than it already is. I would argue the process isn't complicated once you understand it. But let's say you know nothing. Those veterans who know nothing really do overcomplicate the process. And something that I say over on CivDiv a lot is let the VA do VA things. You know, I'll have tons of questions saying, how do I submit a PACT Act claim? How do I do this? How do I do that? And I'm just like, one, there's no such thing as a PACT Act claim. I get you're saying it because you heard it on YouTube. Not a big deal. Relax, take a seat, breathe, just submit the claim, right? The VA will do VA things. And so if you truly can't afford a DBQ or a private Nexus, which is a lot of veterans, especially prior to having that rating, and VHA won't do a DBQ for you, I would just submit the evidence-based claim and let the VBA process do its thing. The process does work. 7 million veterans would not be service-connected if the process didn't work. Is it perfect? Absolutely not, okay? But submitting your evidence-based claims, evidence meaning evidence from service and current diagnosis, the process will work itself out. What are your thoughts on the question, or anything that, or how I answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the window of hope here, right? Because we're talking about your inability to get that DBQ. And regardless of what channels you're watching out there, or posts or vlogs or blogs or anything that you're reading out there, you're going to see stuff about how important a DBQ is. And like, that's just this is going to get you service connected, right? So I can see somebody out there going, oh my God, like your heart drops that you can't get a DBQ.
Yeah.
Here's the reality. The DBQ, disability questionnaire, is a blank piece of paper, right? Garbage in, garbage out, first of all, right? So it's a form. It's a form with some questions on it. If you want, you could print out a DBQ yourself, right? You can find it, read it, look at it, see what kind of questions they're asking with regard to your specific condition. Make some notes, right? Then go to the schedule of ratings in the CFR, well, eCFR. Go to eCFR online and Control F, and eventually you'll find your condition. Read through it, and it's going to have numbers. It doesn't actually have percentage signs. It just has like a ... 70, ... 50, ... 30, right? The 30, the 50, the 70, those are percentages, right? So you'll read and you'll figure out which rating you should be at based on your own. Typically, you'll be able to figure out what your rating should be. And now it's up to you to go make another appointment with your doctor, who's not going at the VHA, because that's the only place you're going because you don't have any money for anything else. And let's say that you're rated at 60% for other conditions and you want to file a new condition, right? So now for this new condition that you're being seen for at VHA, you want to make sure that you are telling the doctor and the nurse who came in or whoever else, and they're asking you questions, make sure that you're telling them all of this stuff, right? Because it's getting put into your medical record. And tell them, hey, look, I really want to make sure that this is put in there. What I'm telling you right now, I want it in there. Don't be a complete jerk, but as they're looking at you shaking your head or shaking their head, tell them you want to make sure that this information is in there. You can also go to the little front office people and tell them that, hey, look, I want to make sure that I get this put into my medical record. This is just an outline of the signs and symptoms that I'm experiencing on this condition, and give it to them. Typically what they're going to do is they're going to pass that on to the doctor, and then the doctor is going to read it and decide whether or not they're going to upload it. Why wouldn't they, right? So just be honest and be truthful and do that. I also, Clay, would suggest people, and I'm going to let you talk about this because you do a good job at it, is utilize that the online stuff to, you know, put some messages back and forth and create something and follow up. So if you could explain that to people, because here's the bottom line. All you're trying to do is get information from the schedule of ratings that pertains to you on your specific condition, put into your medical records. A DBQ is just another piece of your medical records, just on a specific form that makes it easy for the VA to understand. But you could take all that same information and just put it in your medical records as Q&A with your doctor, and that's fine too. It's going to accomplish the same thing. So don't fret, don't be stressed out. It's just you need to take a knee, adjust fire, and then go back in prepared and educated, right, Clay? So
Yeah.
jump on that, how people can contact their doctor, give them some few things and all that good stuff.
Yeah, sending the secure message to your provider is an absolute banger of a tool. What I'm actually going to do, Jason, and this is going to be on the fly, so you'll have to excuse me here. There we go. Look, it worked out perfectly. First, I want to show how to get to the public-facing DBQs, and then we'll talk how to look at the DBQ and then send that secure message, because it should be not necessarily copy and paste. You're going to have to explain your symptoms as they are. But if you just Google public VA DBQ, and I'm doing this live right now, Gunny Google goes a far way, okay? Public DBQs, bam. This is what the VA tried to get rid of in like 17, 18-ish. You scroll down, and here's all the DBQs going by body system. I'm going to start with mental health because that's the symptoms are very outlined. And so mental disorders, I'm going to click that, share this tab over here. I'll go, I don't know why it went to the middle, but here we go. You can print this out, save it, download it, do whatever you want. Now, I'm not going to log into my VA profile because all my PII is going to be there for everyone to see. But if I were to send a secure message for my mental health VA claim and I'm wanting healthcare, I'm scrolling down and the mental health DBQ has a whole section titled symptoms. There we go. Section 3, symptoms. And so you can, on your own, you can see I'm checking these right here, right? Suspiciousness, panic attacks that occur weekly or less often, or more than once a week. Whichever one you are, you can just, I'm not going to check all these. Whatever it is for you. And now when I go send my secure message, which I can do on my phone, I can do it online. It maybe takes 10 minutes. Now I can say, hey, doc, I've been really depressed. I have anxiety because of XYZ. I get panic attacks weekly, right? Often 2 to 3 times a week. And this is not a, don't look at this as cheating on a test, because you do have to have those symptoms, right? That sending that secure message is going to warrant an exam. There's a time frame the VHA has on responding to that secure message. And so you're going to have the exam. So by no means am I saying, say you have symptoms that you don't. That's called fraud. But if you have these symptoms, it's an easy way to communicate. And the VA gives it to you right here. Here are the symptoms: impaired judgment, abstract thinking, gross impairment, disturbances of motivation and mood. If you punched the wall in the house and you broke plates because you and your spouse got in an argument, that is something that you can describe to your provider, and really that details the symptoms that are on 38 CFR. And so I wouldn't say, copy paste, what is it up here? Panic attacks more than once a week. I would describe them as they are. Hey, doc, I usually get 2 to 3 panic attacks before I go into work, before I am in a crowd, whatever that looks like for you, you would have to describe your symptoms. But yeah, sending that secure message, the DBQ is a good outline to say, hey, here are my symptoms. So even if the VHA won't complete the DBQ, which by the way is complete baloney for the record, they should, but even if they don't, you now have evidence to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to submit this claim without a DBQ. The C&P examiner is going to complete it. But now I can say, hey, C&P examiner, a few months ago, I've been talking with my VA provider about my depressed mood, my panic attacks, whatever. And so what you're doing during that exam, and this is probably, if you listen to anything of this whole episode or any other episode we have, this is the golden nugget here. If during your C&P exam, the words that come out of your mouth aren't one-time complaints, but they reference your medical evidence. So, hey, doc, I've reported to my healthcare team that I get panic attacks more than once a week. Just by saying that and you have the evidence, it forces the C&P examiner to concede because you have the evidence. And if for whatever reason they don't, which is the C&P examiners are the other topic we're going to go to here in a second, even if they don't, so you have the evidence, and that is what allows you to do a high level of review. What I see most often, Jason, is veterans submit claims without evidence, and the single point of failure during that scenario is the C&P. You are relying on the C&P examiner to do it for you, which, hey, if you get a good one, roll tide, brother, or whatever they say down there, right? If you don't, you are in the same boat as everyone else where you felt like you had a good exam because you expressed you were vulnerable, you said what you needed to say, but the examiner's like, nah, you don't get panic attacks more than once a week, right? So it really takes the voice away from the examiner and it gives it back to the veteran with evidence. And since it's sending the secure message is one of many ways veterans can do that. But yes, absolutely solid. Did that spark any thoughts, or you want to move on to C&P examiners?
Yeah, let's move it on.
No one yeah.
Yeah.
No one I dislike more. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I know. Well, I think the claims companies are right up there. So, I just want to double down on how valid what you just said was. When you're expressing it to the C&P examiner and you're referencing that this is all documented in my people are lazy, right? A C&P examiner should read through everything that they got. Do they? Probably not. They do a once quick glance over, right? So when you're saying, oh yeah, it's in my medical records and I've said it, now that puts it on them to either believe you or go look for it themselves. And when they find it, they have to concede, like you said. So you need to make sure it's in there. Whether they go look or they just believe you, that's huge, right? Because like you said, now they don't have to interpret anything. They don't have to go, let me put my thinking cap on here. No, you have it documented. Now they can't contradict that. That would be ridiculous. So they would look like a fool if they contradicted it. So they won't, because their narcissism won't let them, right? But they're doctors, right? So anyway, back to you.
Yeah, so let's transition to C&P examiners. And I want to use what we just talked about as kind of a segue. And I like to look at C&P exams as if you're walking your dog, right? There's two types of dog walkers. You have the dog walkers that have a really aggressive pit bull, sometimes even a chihuahua, right? Where the dog is pulling and yanking, and the dog is telling you, this is the path we're going, get over it, right? That's one, the examiner being the dog. There are another type of dog walkers who put their leash on the dog. They, 1 foot, whatever dog trick they got going on the leash. And then the handler is choosing the path of the dog, and the dog is following the handler at that point. And that's how your C&P exam is going to go. It's one or the other. There is no middle ground. It's just one or the other. So if you do not have evidence which forces the examiner to look through your records. Okay, I just say that with quotes. And look through. When I say look through your records, I mean look through what the VA sent them. They are driving that conversation, and they are now asking you, talk to me about your migraines. Talk to me about this. Talk to me about that, because maybe they saw something in your records or a lack of, and they want clarification. That is them controlling the walk, the C&P exam. Where you have veterans on the other hand saying, hey, I already know my evidence. I can tell you, June of 2024 was probably my 10th or 11th time speaking to my psychiatrist about my mental health. Here are my symptoms, bam, 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 bam. I'm an examiner, and now I'm like, oh, June 2024, summer, bam, here it is. Here's all your evidence. And the veteran is now in control of that exam. I promise you, the examiner will be like, this is the best veteran ever, because you're essentially doing their job for them, and they will appreciate that. Now, there's some personality in there, right? You definitely don't want to step on anyone's toes, but if you have the evidence, you need to speak about your evidence instead of speaking, well, I think I'm depressed and here's why, and there's nothing in your records to indicate that. you're now allowing the C&P examiner to do that, which comes down to the segue here. Sorry, that was a long segue. There are your good examiners who sometimes here's my definition of a good examiner. If the veteran allows the examiner to drive that conversation and drive that exam, there are examiners out there that will do their due diligence. They're looking through your records. They're going back. On my migraine exam, I had a one-line complaint, which I had no idea of, from 2011, right after I got back from Afghan. I had no idea that was there. Had that examiner not been good, there's no way I would have been denied, and that's it. No HLR, no possibilities, nothing. That's a good examiner, and it can still happen. The issue is your examiners generally have very, very little experience. What's hilarious to me is when you get a C&P exam in the mail, like through FedEx, it will talk about the examiner, and years of experience of being a C&P examiner is always in there. Every single exam, and I wish I saved them. I'm so mad at myself for not saving those. But every examiner I ever had less than 1 year experience. And I want you to just think about this for a second, right? They're generally going to be young. They just got out of med school. They have school debt. They have a family. They're doing C&P exams as like a side hustle. That's not their primary job, right? They probably work for a practice or something like that. So now you have this person who's has a 95, is putting in overtime hours. They're brand new to C&P exams. They don't even know. They can spell VA disability because they're medical professionals. They just got out of med school, right? Assuming they are a doctor, which they may not be. That's a crazy thought. But they can spell VA disability, but they don't know the process. And so now you have that type of C&P examiner that's just going through the motions and checking off the box. When the VA sends your claim to an examiner, it's like a checklist, right? VA is saying, hey, here's the contract. We're paying you to do this. Check all these boxes. A bad examiner will do the bare minimum for the VA and not do their due diligence. And so it's just, I cannot stand bad C&P examiners. And the reason why bad C&P examiners actually matter is because the VA solely relies on that exam for service connection. If you get a bad C&P exam, the rater's not going to be like, oh, well, that examiner was wrong because of XYZ. They're just going to be like, yep, not service connected, right? Right. And so the C&P exam is probably the most important day of your VA disability claim process. I know Jason likes to talk about the $1 million deal. It really comes down to the exam. That is your, put up or shut up type day. That's my thoughts. That's at least my opening line for C&P examiners. I hate them. I don't like them. A lot of them do quit being a C&P examiner and they become medical opinion providers, which is hilarious to me. Because they know they can make more money, and they know that when the veteran sends them evidence, they can now do a full, complete DBQ, right? Because the C&P examiner is limited to the evidence the VA sends them, which is a whole other issue, which is actually the next topic we'll get into. But Jason, what are your thoughts on C&P examiners?
Well, it's I love that you enlightened everybody with that they could be a pit bull or a chihuahua. Mm-hmm. So, that's really good. I'd never really, So I would say that the one thing, I could sit here and just reiterate everything you said, but the one point that I am going to kind of touch on here is the C&P exam is like the culmination, right, of all of your efforts up until then. And if you didn't do much prep before you get to your C&P exam for your claim, you have a lower chance of having a very successful C&P exam. There's different versions, okay? A C&P exam is not just whether or not you're approved for your claim, right, to get it service connected or get it connected as a secondary or whatever it is. It's not just that. It's getting the appropriate rating as well. And you have to go into this with those two goals in mind. And when you do the footwork up front, and this goes back to that $1 million deal kind of aspect, put the work in. right?
Mm-hmm.
Do your homework, read the schedule of ratings, read the DBQs, be invested in the process. Don't just, pick some things out of the air and throw it in a claim and go, we'll see what happens. I hope I get rated higher. Because that happens probably more than half of the time, I would say. It's a lot. It's a big number of people just picking things out of the air and just throwing it to see if it happens. Don't do that, right? Take the time and be prepared. The more you put in to the actual claims process, the more prepared you're going to be at the C&P exam. Do not be afraid to bring in notes, print things out,
Yeah.
read things, right? Look, we all have bad memories. Some of us have worse memories than others due to service-connected conditions like TBIs and stuff. So don't be afraid to take stuff in writing. And if you feel weird about it, right, because it's a C&P exam, then say something when you first get in there. When you sit down with them, say, look, I brought some notes because I don't want to miss anything. And I have a hard time kind of remembering everything. And I don't want to leave here going, I wish I would have said X. And they'll just appreciate you for that. And that's not a big deal. And they go, oh, yeah, that's fine. They're not going to be like, and the veteran brought in notes. Oh, I can't believe it. That's not, then nobody cares, right? There won't even be anything. Maybe they'll say the veteran seemed prepared. Maybe they might say something like that. Well, good. You're taking it serious, right? So I think that's important. And it does come down to that day, really, for those two things, being in a position of knowing what is going to transpire from that specific day, that C&P exam, is one, the acknowledgement that your condition is at least as likely, clay shirt, at least as likely as not, right? That it's met that threshold, right? Which is getting you service connected. Then they're going to talk about your signs and symptoms and durations and all of that stuff, which is going to create the rating you are. Are you a 10% or are you a 50% or are you a 30%? So that's going to come from you being prepared, right, and educated, coming in with the information you need. And if you need to read it so you don't forget a word, because believe me, if you forget a couple words or you don't articulate it correctly, all of a sudden you change in the rating schedule with just a couple words in some cases. Now, if it's a muscular skeletal, bend over type of thing, well, then it's based on how far you move, not exactly your words. But things like migraines or mental health, that type of stuff is tell me how you're feeling, or the old GERD, man, boy, did people miss out on that boat. GERD was pretty sweet. So anyway, that's it. Let's move on to the next one, Clay.
Yeah, real quick, I want to go back to the HVAC because there was something that was said that really got under my skin. The VA was asked, whoever oversees the C&P examiner piece of the VA, whatever his title is, he was asked about the accuracy of C&P exams. And the context was, hey, we're having a hearing about contracted C&P exams and how bad they are. And all the stats that the VA were giving was C&P exams are perfect. So, for instance, the statistic that the VA gave the committee was 97% approval rate. Now, I looked into that 97%, Jason, and what the VA was actually describing is when C&P examiners complete a DBQ, that completion of the DBQ doesn't have mistakes, meaning they signed it appropriately, they filled in all the blocks. It has nothing to do with a thorough exam.
Right.
And so the reason I want to bring that up, this is a theory, right? Yeah. And so the VA, in my opinion, during that committee was hand picking statistics. 97% is absolutely insane, right? So we have a hearing about C&P exams suck, and now we have the VA giving stats of a 97% approval rate, which is absolutely insane. In one representative, I think it was Mr. Self. I have no idea what state he's representative of, but he had asked, hey, and I'm so glad he asked this because he kind of called the VA out on their baloney. He was like, well, why are we having this hearing? If it's 97%, well, why are we having this hearing? And it really got down to, that's when the VA explained, well, these are completed DBQs, which has nothing to do with the thorough exam. So it kind of goes back to the, our first topic of DBQs. C&P examiner will complete the DBQ. And as per the statistic the VA gave, that DBQ will be complete. However, that has nothing to do with the exam itself, and your evidence will really drive that exam. So, like, which dog walker do you want to be is really like that culminating piece there. Do you have any thoughts on that HVAC stat, or do you want to move on to VSRs?
One of the things that did kind of make me think of, and I might butcher these numbers, but I'm pretty sure this is what it is. Veteran files a claim. The claim comes back unfavorable. That could be not service connected, or it could be service connected, but a 0%. I feel as though I should be a 30 or whatever, right? So an unfavorable decision. Veteran files for a higher level review or a supplemental claim. 30% chance it gets approved there at what they wanted. Okay, so already you're looking at it. Okay, well, there's a 70% situation here, right? That means that 70% are going to lose that, which means that the VA was probably right the first time, right? But 30% wrong. Then on top of that, even if of that 70%, the VA supposedly got it right because they denied you again, you move it to the Board of Appeals and you have another 30% chance of actually winning and getting it awarded in your favor at some sort of a higher level. So it blows my mind.
Yeah.
Because really that's the data that you need to look at to trace back and go, did you really do right back here for the veteran? Because it went through this whole process and got over here to the board and they ruled in their favor, which means you screwed up here, you screwed up here, and oh, by the way, you screwed up over here. Back to you, Clay.
Yeah, no, it's once he said 90. So I don't want to get too nerdy about this, and we will change this in very fast. I teach assessments as one of my core subjects on how to properly conduct, measures of effectiveness. And when they said 97%, I was like, you've got to be, any company in the world ever doesn't have a 97% success rate. Amazon does not have a 97% success rate, right? And they are clearly cherry picking evidence and stats to paint the picture, which is whatever. Anyways, here we are. Now we have Veterans Daily topic to talk about.
And if you sit there and lie about how great things are, you're never going to fix it. They're just in this spiral going down and trying to cover it. Look, be honest. You know what? Quite frankly, sir, it sucks. And we really need to address it. We just don't have the bandwidth, the resources, the money, the whatever. But if you fund that $12 billion or whatever, right? Even though that's for VHA, we'll take a piece of the VHA's money over here to the VBA side to fix that problem.
If you fund the $12 billion for VHA, we still won't complete DBQs for veterans. Okay.
That's right.
Boom. Zing, right? Okay. So I want to transition to VSRs, which are raters. Now, there are different VSRs. There are your rater, your adjudicator, your VSR processor. If you just Google VSRs, you'll see the list. There's like 5 or 6 different VSRs that are encompassed in the process as a whole. And so there's really 2 sticking points, Jason, that are apparent to me at least. And that is, first, when you submit a claim to the VA, right, looks at your claim, they look at your evidence, they do the intake, that's the evidence gathering piece. They are the one that orders C&P exams, okay? 2, a lot of those are unwarranted. That's a different subject. We won't even go down that road. But the VA is also responsible for sending the C&P examiner records. How many times have we heard? I'm sure you've heard it on your channel as well. Hey, I went to my C&P exam and they didn't have my records. Luckily, I did because I brought them in with me. When a veteran reports that, which has been thousands of times, at least that I've seen in the last few months, when a veteran reports that, what that means is the VA did not send the relevant medical evidence to the examiner. And you say, well, the examiner needs to have evidence to make the nexus. And then you say, well, if they don't have the relevant evidence, how can they make the nexus? You are set up for failure. When that happens, it is literally not speculating. The VA is setting your claim to be denied because they are in control of that. That's probably my biggest gripe with the VA disability claims process. And how do you know the VA sent the C&P examiner your records? You don't, because they are not transparent about the process. That's the next topic. They just feed right into each other, right? And then the second one, Jason, a sticking point for VSRs is when they get that rating, there's a time quota. So, for instance, my performance at work as a federal employee is based on students we teach, what they pass, how they pass, if I show up and teach my classes, if I'm doing my instructor badges, because we're curriculum developers and instructors. That's how my performance is based, where I get raises, if I'm at a different step, whatever. The VSRs, their performance is based on how many claims did you adjudicate, not adjudicate correctly, right? It's just quantitative. And so you can have someone, I'm going to say it's 10 here. You can have a VSR who did their due diligence, but they only looked at 10 claims, but those 10 claims are correct. Okay, they are correct. You can appeal them. They'll come back with the same decision because it's correct. You can have that VSR. You can have another one who does 100 claims. Who the heck knows if they are, same amount of time. Half of them are not correct. Half of them are correct. Half of them have the service connection, but they're rated at 0% because the rater failed to look at the evidence for symptomology, right? And so now it's like, well, who's getting the raise? It's the one that did the 100 claims and not 10 claims. Right. That's a time quota. That's why that matters. And that is yet another sticking point. It's just all these ingredients of VHA and DBQs and C&P examiners sucking, and then the VSR time quota. All these things bring this pot of basically shit, right? There's no other way to say it. And that's the VA disability claims process. Those are the two sticking points that I see for VSRs. Jason, go ahead and take it from there.
So here's the thing. We identify all these horrible pitfalls and situations and downfalls, whatever you want to call it, through the process. Not to just call it out, right? Because it needs to get fixed, but it's not going to get fixed overnight. And it might be a decade. I mean, it could be a long time before it's fixed. Mm-hmm. However, knowing that it's there can allow you to prep yourself even more to help get past some of those hurdles. Now, my kind of methodology in the VA claims process is make it as easy as possible for everybody involved in that process, right? Make it easy for the C&P examiner, like we talked about, right? Make it easy for the rater to understand where you should fall, right? And when you're prepared for those things and how you file your claim and you're providing all the evidence you need and it's clear and it's not, this hard to understand thing, and you went above and beyond and got a little extra information and tied it all together real nice and all of that, it just makes the whole process much easier. Does that mean that the VA is going to get it right all the time? No. But one, you are well aware of what you should be rated because you did all the research. And two, you know that you supplied everything that you needed. You understand that you supplied the perfect claim scenario. And if you got denied, you could easily file a higher level review, check the box that says informal conference, have that conversation and point right to where whatever's missing is. If for some weird reason you missed something or you feel like you needed to double down a little bit, you already know. You're kind of prepared for that. And now you could file that supplemental and provide that additional information. Again, does the VA get it right all the time? No, that's why I referred back a little while ago to that. Filing a review with the VA, you got a 30% chance of getting something better back. And then even if you push it to the board, you have another 30% chance of getting something better back. So don't be afraid to use those resources. They're there for a reason. There's many veterans out there, Clay, and I'm sure you know too, that you get bad news back from the VA. And as soon as you get to the bad news piece, you're done.
Yep.
The VA, all this stuff, and you move on and you forget about it. Next thing you know, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years went by, and now you're circling back around. And meanwhile, you've missed out on everything, and you're starting from square one again. Don't do that. Be frustrated, sure, right? But don't ever, ever, ever lose your effective date and take advantage of the processes that are in place to fix whatever issue happened. It's going to happen. It might not happen to you, but it's going to happen to somebody. And if it does happen to you, just be prepared and go through that. Again, I'm here to provide the silver lining around Clay's cloud for you. Did that spark anything for you, Clay?
It did. I really want to move on to transparency because I watched the entire committee hearing on that and I'm not digging the VFW, by the way, but the VFW executive director, I think that's his title. His name's Ryan Gallucci. I met him. He's a cool dude. I met him at the VFW convention. I'm not digging him at all. But what he was talking about is he was complaining about his exam, about how he had to travel 62 miles for his exam, which does suck. He lives in Maryland and his exam was in Delaware, which also means he has to cross this huge bridge. And if you're in that area, you know that bridge sucks. You know what I'm talking about. I've been on it 3 times and every time I just hate it, which sucks, right? 62 miles. But then in his testimony, he talks about how he is a VSO. He's the executive director of a VSO. Prior to that, he was a Veteran Service Organization rep, meaning he can submit claims on behalf of the veteran. And so he has the knowledge and the know-how. And then he says, and this was what got under my skin. Then he said that he actually texted the C&P exam director that was sitting next to him for the VA and got that situation cleared up, right? And now I'm watching this and I'm like, okay, so you have, I'm going to use the word privilege here, right? And I'm not saying that in a political context, but he has the means and the connections to get that. What about everyone else? Okay.
Right. Yeah.
What about everyone else? I just had a veteran send me, I haven't scrubbed it for PII yet, so I don't want to show it because I'm going to do my due diligence on that. But his C&P exam was 168 miles away from his house. What about that veteran? Right. He's not on first name basis with the C&P exam, SES. And so that got under my skin. And then Ryan Gallucci went on LinkedIn and talked about, his testimony and how great it was. And it was a good testimony. I'm not taking away from it. But then I commented on his post and I was like, hey, man, I think you're missing the everyday veteran here. And if I were to make one recommendation, if the VA could only do one thing of everything Jason and I talk about, they can only do one thing. I fully believe in the green button that Jason and I had discussed before. There is no reason that I can, on my laptop right now, if I wanted to share my information with the world, okay, I can log on to va.gov. I can see all my information. I can download my records. Social Securities are associated with that. HIPAA is associated with that. It's a secure login to the VA. There is no reason a veteran cannot have access to their C file for the VA disability claims process. There's none. We have secure login. It's through ID.me, through DS Logon, whatever it is that you use. It's a secure logon. If the VA were transparent through the process, it would fix a lot of issues. It would also give power to the veteran to keep the VA honest. I'll just give one example, right? Let's say you submit a fully developed claim, meaning you have, with your claim, you submitted evidence from service, you submitted a current diagnosis, you have a current DBQ with your diagnosis and your symptoms, and you have a Nexus Letter. Bam, that's fully developed. What's the VA going to do? They're going to schedule you a C&P exam. They're not supposed to, but they're going to. And so if the VA were transparent through the process, now as a veteran, I can say, hey, why am I scheduled for a C&P exam? And if there is a valid reason saying the DBQ missed something, whatever, fine. If there's not, now the veteran has the power to say, hey, that's not right. And we can't do that right now. That's why veterans are mad at the VA, because we have absolutely zero power. Once that claim is submitted, that's it. Right? Unless you're using an accredited rep. And even there, VSOs will say they can advocate for the veteran during the claims process, which they absolutely can. That's a true statement, but not to the scale of what that truly means. To go to bat for the veteran. Even the accredited rep is at the whim of the VA's process. That's why you'll hear VSOs all the time. VSOs will complain about the VA because of that same reason. They have no power. And so that's really, transparency specifically for the VA disability claims process. If the VA did that one thing, I think it would alleviate so many issues by itself. I'll kind of stop it on there, Jason. And then what are your thoughts on just transparency or the green button? So to speak?
I love the green button idea. I think that they should implement that. I think that it's a twofold kind of, fix. I think that the transparency aspect, sure, right, for us to know, kind of what things look like, what's going on, where things are at. But still, it's the education piece. A veteran who doesn't know, right? So they're not going to go, here's the here it is in the M21, and here's where we're at, and so now you can compare and contrast. They're not going to do that, so you have to do that. And we're lazy, so we're not, right? So then we're okay, great, green button, woo, there it is, and that's about it. So I think that it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Clay. The amount of time that it takes for a VSR to complete claims and how many claims they have to process as far as their quotas are concerned, that process needs to be revamped. And it shouldn't be that. It should be how many of your claims that you processed got appealed and overturned. That is what we're going to measure your success on, right? Because it's all trackable. It's all data. It's all living in a digital world, and they can, you touched it and now it did this and then it did that. You lost. Hey, they did that. It still went back to what you did. Good, right? So, and maybe if it's just at the VA level, the VBA for HLRs and for supplementals, and that's the criteria. If it goes to the board and they overturn, doesn't count against you for your spot, right? Only for higher level reviews and supplementals. And even then, supplementals probably shouldn't even count because now there's
new evidence. Yeah.
Right. So I think that we need to change that, though, from how fast can you get them done to a different way that encompasses quality. The problem, though, is that you're running this gigantic organization that has a huge backlog that you're getting just hammered in the face every day about. And so you're trying to speed up the process, right?
Yeah.
But now you're stuck with quality. Now, sure, we can jump quality up, but now the process is going to take longer and the backlog is going to get bigger, and I'm going to get hit in the face again for that. So it's this weird kind of space. And I think that we as a community need to be okay with something, right? Which one do you want? Do you want quality or do you want quickness, right? Is a real conversation, right? Because always asking for more money doesn't always work. So working with what we got, what would you prefer, right? And what do you want to hold the VA accountable for? Of course, you want to say both, right? I want it fast and I want it, quality. Well, that's not real. Let's be realistic for a minute. I think that one aspect to that is really segregating out the claims, right? Just age, criteria, first claim versus additional claims, right? Somebody who's rated 60% already and they put in something that might take them to a 70 or an 80, maybe that claim takes a little bit longer, right? Because you have a person who's brand new, they're just filing their claim now, or you have somebody who's 93 years old and they're filing their claim. Probably front load those ones, right? Look, we're all used to that to some extent. I think that if it was the rule of the land, we would be, if we knew that that's what it was, right? Like, here's the rule of the land. It's like the gunny who's waiting to eat after everybody else eats, right? So we kind of have that in our mindset and in our DNA that certain folks get to go first, right? In this case, on the veteran side, hey, the The 93-year-old vet, have at it, man. I'll wait 2 more months. I'll wait 3 more months. You go. I would gladly say that. Especially if I already had a 60% or a 70% and I just filed an additional claim for whatever. So I think that there should be, instead of a first come, first serve, given the circumstances that we're in from an organizational level, right? So no more money, we'll say, no more money to address the problem. Fix it as you have it. Okay, I'm going to segregate claims. I'm going to prioritize in different buckets, maybe 3 or 4 different buckets, and I'm going to remove the KPIs for all of my staff. Right, my performance indicators for raises and stuff are going to change and be more about doing the right things and getting the quality aspect up. And I'm going to have it segregated, and that's how I'm going to kind of function it to get through this. Sadly, money doesn't grow on a tree, right? Here we are. It's already, it's the budget of the VA is really astronomical. Actually, it's just such a huge number, and it's so huge that outsiders and even some people who you would think wouldn't say anything just because they're part of the military question the amount of money that's being spent on veteran affairs stuff, right? And so that's a slippery slope. And if you can fix it without asking for more, it's probably the better way to go, in my opinion, right? Because I think that we're going to continue to see claims rise even as we're decreasing in veteran population from awareness, right? And look, it's not that people are mistreating the system and they're taking advantage of it. No, it's that people don't really realize the benefits they have. And it wasn't until recently that there's information like this coming out from the people that have been doing this for 5, 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, however long they've been doing it, to the people like me and you who've been doing it for a couple years, and all the different vlogs and the Had It and the this and the that and all the different places. I think that it's awareness, right? The awareness has increased so much that it's going to continue to drive claims up, which equals money. So I think we just need to be careful with where we're at with the budget, not on claim stuff, but more like, additional stuff. If it takes a year and 4 months to process a claim, maybe we have to be okay with that. It used to take 4 or 5 years. I mean, So anyway, what are your thoughts on some of that stuff, Clay? I'd love to remind a little bit.
I think so. The HVAC, which is the House of Veteran Affairs Committee, they are the ones that really drive what the VA does, right? And the information that they receive, they're kind of the decision maker, HVAC, and I'm using that as a generalization because it's Congress. They are the decision maker. And so what is briefed to them, they then interpret and then give guidance to the VA. That's the process. That's how the process works. It's much more than that, but that's the synopsis, right? And so I would make the argument that what is being briefed to the HVAC is being handpicked and cherry-picked, and that's what leads us to where we're at right now. For instance, if the backlog was such a huge contentious piece from the PACT Act specifically, and that's the only thing that anyone heard from essentially 2020, the end of 2021 to right now, basically backlog this, backlog that, backlog this. And that's why, that's being briefed to HVAC. HVAC's like, hey, VA, fix this problem. Boom. That's why we see 1 million plus PACT Act claims approved. And then we have this time quota issue, and that has now turned into other issues. The reason why I say that is because I would make the argument that what is being briefed to the committee is not the actual problem, right? So, for instance, the last hearing, 97% of DBQs completed by CMP examiners are good. It's like, hey, that might be a factual statement, but that's not the story, right? The story is what's happening on the ground are CMP examiners suck, and CMP exams are being scheduled 168 miles away. Okay, I know this because I just saw it in my email. That's one example. There are millions of examples just like that, but yet HVAC is getting the brief of 97% are correct. Then you have Mr. Gallucci's testimony of saying, hey, my exam was 62 miles, but it was fixed. Everything got handled. It's like, okay, because you texted the director of CMP exams, right? And you are the executive director of the VFW. I mean, that's a position that when you speak, people move. And so, but we don't have that privilege. And so I would make the argument that the information HVAC is getting it's just not what's going on. What needs to happen, and I'm going to say something wild. I would love to see your everyday 9 to 5 type veteran, not a VSO, just some veteran who can articulate their thoughts and say, hey, HVAC, here was my process. Okay. I don't want to hear about Mr. Gallucci's process because it's not the same. He has means, he has the privilege. Congress needs to hear from veterans, and that's not happening. What they're hearing is 97% of DBQs are complete. What they're hearing is Mr. Gallucci had a discrepancy. It got solved.
It got fixed. With a phone call or a text.
I'm gonna say something very strong. So the fuck what, dude?
Right.
That's not what's happening, and that is, in my opinion, the core problem is Congress is not being informed on what's actually happening. I'm going to say something that's bad about VSOs. I think VSOs, when they brief Congress, they have a business perspective, right? Instead of a veteran perspective. And I'll die on that hill every day. And these are just some of the core problems with VHA and DBQs and CMP examiners and VSRs. Being lazy would be a generalization, right? And transparency. And then we have the HVAC hearing. All of these are little bitty things that make up the VA disability claims process and why it doesn't work.
Right. Clay, you brought it up, and I'm going to kind of just give a call to action, if you will. If you have issues with anything like what Clay's talking about, right? The peek behind the curtain of the real process with DBQs, having to go far away, shoddy exam, all of that type of stuff. Imagine for one moment if 1,000 of you reached out to your congressional district office and told them that, right? Mm-hmm. There's easily hundreds of you in some congressional districts, thousands of you in other congressional districts who have, over the course of the last 5 years, experienced something with the VA. Express it at the constituency level. You are the voting block for that congressional member, right? Not the VSO at Capitol Hill talking with them to figure out what kind of, how we can pose in front of the Capitol with whatever bill in our hands, right? We need both things. Don't get me wrong. We do need the veteran service organizations championing stuff at the Capitol. But we need you in the districts banging on the desk, right? This could be a phone call. This could be a leave a message after hours. This could be shoot them an email. This could be swing by. These offices are open. You can walk in. It's an office. They're there to serve you. They're going to ask you what you're there for. They have a staffer who directly deals with military and veteran issues. Talk with that staffer. Let them know your thoughts. Write it down. Hand it to them, right? If enough people do it, we might actually get either some real questions asked in these type of hearings, right? Well, I've heard from 47 constituents in my district in the last days that this is happening. Explain that, right? So just quiet mouths don't get fed. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying. Back to you, Clay.
Yeah, I got a little heated there. I'm still a little heated, actually. Totally agree. I'll probably digress from that topic, but it all comes down to transparency, right? The committee doesn't understand the process because the VA is not being transparent during the hearing. The VA is not being transparent to the veteran, which is why when a CMP examiner doesn't do their due diligence, the veteran doesn't even have a voice until the claim's decided. That's wrong. right? It all comes down to transparency. That's really all I have, Jason. Unless you that sparks any thoughts, and then you can go ahead and take it away from there.
I do have one last thought on that. Imagine this process. Imagine they go through the claims process, and before they finalize your claim, they say, hey, this is what we're proposing. Do you agree? No, I don't agree. Here's some more information, or did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Boom, they take another extra month, and then they decide, right? So you skip the whole supplemental, you skip the HLR, and you don't have to wait for it. You don't have to then schedule it and then, and wait. It would streamline that whole process, because I can guarantee that many claims get an HLR or get a supplemental, right?
Yeah.
So let's just front load that with here's a sneak peek. Here's the percentage that we're looking to award you for that condition. Do you agree? You get like 10 days to say something, or they move forward, right? Bam, they move forward, you're good. You don't, well, now you're doing an HLR right then in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not going to take any extra time. I don't know. Anyway, so I'd love to get people's thoughts on that anyway in the description or in the comments. That'd be cool. And with that, Clay, unless you have anything to add to that.
No, that was a symphony. That's exactly how the process should work.
I think that's great. I don't know, whatever. Yeah. And a green button. All right. So with that, thanks so much for watching. We appreciate you. Have a great one. And remember, if we don't take care of each other, something went wrong.